Hi, good afternoon. My name is Josh Winning from the Region 8 Education Service Center. Thank you for joining us again for part of another one of our webinar series that we're working on here today. Excited to bring to you a program that we've been involved with for several years and have some of the architects of that program on that has a dramatic impact on helping students better plan and prepare for future career and academic success. And so without further ado, I want to welcome you to today's session on the ASK program, a career readiness program. And we're pleased to welcome today two gentlemen who are going to be helping us go through the program. And that is on your screen, you can see Mr. Steve Depker and Mr. Michael Gorman, and also assisting in helping us putting the program together is Mrs. Barbara Cisco. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mr. Steve Depker. Steve, tell us about the ASK program and why is it something schools should be considering for their students in their schools? Welcome.
Well, it's very an interesting concept, especially to a lot of people who are not used to thinking about that big of an emphasis on careers in school. Students need career education for a couple of reasons. There's many reasons, but just focusing on two right now. First of all, this program allows them to become goal setters. And being able to set goals is a lifelong skill that can be reflected through their career planning. And then secondly, just making sense out of their daily school coursework. If a student doesn't really understand why he's doing algebra or why he's doing science, biology, whatever, having a career connection to his classes really makes a big difference in the motivation for students. Our program ASK has 5 steps, and it's a very simple concept of, first of all, somebody understanding who they are. Secondly, connecting that to a career interest, selecting in the whole career interest. So I'm connecting myself to who I am, and we're also then selecting a couple of those things to focus on. After I focused on them, I'm taking a look at how much is it going to cost? What am I going to do to pay for all of this as time goes on? And finally, making sure that I have a reflective piece, because we all know that without reflection there is no learning. With a reflective piece of go, how am I on course? What are the gaps between what I want to do and what I'm able to do? So here are those 5 steps again: know, connect, select, invest, and go. Who am I? The career pathway based on my self-knowledge, the pathway to study that matches those interests, the time, effort, and cost planning to pursue my career pathway, and finally that plan to reach my pathway goal. We also like to take a look at what something is and what it's not. One of the first concerns that a lot of people have about the program is the thought of taking 6th, 7th, and 8th graders especially and pigeonholing them at a very young age into a career. And that is not what this program does. It makes no attempt to make anybody decide. The only thing we're trying to do is to make an art out of deciding. The second thing that it is it's based on relationships. It is a positive interaction for each grade level. It promotes relationships and it provides framework for students to talk about their future. It offers opportunities to change pathway plans as often as needed. The student wants to change his mind 20 times a year. There's no problem with that at all. Because again, we are working toward the goal of being a planner, not what the plan finally is. And following a logical and easy format for goal setting. The 5 steps make it very, very easy. So the first of the 5 steps is the know step. Who am I? This is something, of course, I'm 74 years old, so I've been doing this for for many, many years, and I'm still not sure I have the answer. So this is kind of an ongoing thing. With our students, we begin them thinking about this through annual assessments. In the Indiana Career Explorer, there's a really easy assessment for the students to take. It's quick, but it's also very comprehensive. It ranks their career interests, takes 5 career interests and ranks them, and it gives them the opportunity to be reflective. So that's, that's one kind of an activity we take. And then for the students to take a look and see, does this really connect with who I am? Does this interest relate to who I am? We'll see a lot of times that students will take a look at what the assessment says and they say, that's not me. But it gives them an opportunity to at least do those reflections.
Okay, so Mike, do you have any comments or questions so far with what we've seen so far?
I really like this whole idea of kids finding out who they are, and especially who they are at an early age. Not necessarily, again, like we're pigeonholing them, but at least starting to get them think about that process. Steve, what type of feedback do you get from kids who fill out these surveys or assessments and then find out they weren't who they thought they were, and then change their mind or whatever? What type of feedback do you get from kids on that type of thing?
A lot of times the students will be very surface. They look at it and they just see it on the very surface, and this gives them an opportunity to lead them into more in-depth thinking. Like, for instance, the most common thing of anybody who's ever worked on these things with students is the idea, one of the things that comes up often is a mortician. And it's like the last thing in the world that any student thinks that he might want to be as a mortician. Now, there's absolutely nothing wrong. I don't mean to allude to there's something wrong with being a mortician, but a mortician is a broad array of jobs. So then you just take a moment and talk to the kids about, well, what do morticians do? It's marketing, it's sales, it's grief counseling. It's so many things that a mortician takes on, that it's a good example for them to dig deeper. Just because it says you want to be something doesn't mean, don't take that literally. Look at it, dig it in real deep and see what can happen.
Steve, I'm going to guess as well, there's probably not the demand for morticians does not estimate to decline. There will always be a steady demand for morticians. Is that fair to say?
Especially as those of us that are 74 get to be 75. That's true.
Oh, hardly.
Well, one thing I see here in the chat room is just a couple people commenting that they like that idea of kids still being able to continue to change and to grow. And it's awesome that this no step allows kids to have that opportunity.
Great. Let's move on to our next step here. Steve, what's next?
Well, the next step in the process is the connect. And we've kind of covered that a little bit in the previous one, but we want to investigate at least 2 career pathways. When we're looking at connect, we're looking at general pathways, not particularly specific careers. So this is an opportunity for students to look at those career pathways and begin narrowing those down. Take a look at your inventory and look at the top 2 and see if you can't agree that maybe those are my top 2 for now. One thing we know that in working at Homestead High School is that over the time, the last few years that we've been doing this, students' top interests don't change, the order changes. So over time, they'll usually have the same 5 top interests, but the order changes. And that's where this connect comes in. Connect is fluid because connect connects to who am I, which is fluid. So these are the 2 points of the 5 steps that we're always going to go back and look at.
Steve, what do you find that students learn? What would be one of the #1 takeaways you feel they get during this connect phase?
Well, I think the opportunity, this is the introductory opportunity for students to really get some answers. In Indiana Career Explorer, there are, I don't know if it's thousands, but there are certainly hundreds of videos. So during that connect thing, when you see that up on the screen, that's something that you might want to do, or you might be interested in, to watch that video and get a little more interest. This is the importance of the teacher or the mentor, or the advisor, whatever you want to call that person that's working with the students, the teachers, to lead them down to dig in deeper and to take a look at the videos. And then, you know, I'm looking at accounting maybe, and so, gosh, my best friend's dad's an accountant. This is a good opportunity for me to sit down with him sometime and talk about it. So the connect thing is extremely important as we look at those areas of professional development for the student.
And kind of following up on Mike's comment from the previous slide, use the term being fluid and the fluidity of the process. Again, allowing as a student grows and matures and discovers themselves and interests. Again, hopefully, if for all of us, we're discovering new interests in our lives throughout our entire lives. So again, not trying to put students in a box or in a corner when they're in 6th, 7th, 8th grade, but allowing them to experience these things, to really be intentional about thinking about this process and connecting it to their that career readiness aspect of their academic careers.
Yeah, I'm looking at the chat room, Josh and Steve, and something that intrigues me is, and I take it it's during this go and connect phase that we start investigating these, but what's the fine line between kids going with their passion and their interests and seeking money or financial rewards?
Well, that's a lot about who they may be. If a certain lifestyle or financial rewards is extremely important to who you are, then that's just natural that they would gravitate toward that. They would take a look at that. But another thing is, regardless of the financial rewards, we want the students to have a sustainable life. And a sustainable life requires a certain level of remuneration. And that's what we're looking at for Northeast Indiana here, is careers that allow them to develop a sustainable life. So money is an issue, certainly is an issue, because money is an issue. So we might as well take a look at it for what it is. But as far as the demands of a very high wage, that's going to go back to who I am and what's going to motivate me moving forward. Okay, then we move to the select. And this is where we get a little more in depth. The students are moving now from career pathways into particular occupations. They're beginning to expand their knowledge and hone that information. And also, as this slide suggests, this is the perfect time to make sure that students are aware of, again, the word fluid, the fluid situation with jobs. To become aware of things like some of the websites that are so excellent, the hot jobs in Indiana, those kind of things. Our slide indicates that 50% of the number of jobs that today's students will work in haven't been created yet. And if you don't believe that, just go ahead and Google sometime jobs that did not exist 10 years ago. And you'll see lists of jobs that come up that didn't exist 10 years ago. Things like an Uber driver didn't exist 10 years ago. Something like a social media manager, anything to do with heavy emphasis in the internet a gamer, somebody who wants to be a game developer. Those things didn't really exist much, maybe in the preliminary stages 10 years ago, but not in the kind of sense that we have today. Students need to understand that. And the schools also need to understand that they're not particularly doing much of a service for students if they're trying to get them job ready in a very narrow sense. But it's more of an attribute kind of thing, as far as what things do I need in order to be successful in an area that hasn't been invented yet. Certainly one of them that comes to mind immediately would be creativity. So those are the kind of topics that the select part of it brings. And we really want the student to select something. Now, again, we encourage them to change it as often as they want to, but they need, as part of these 5 steps, to pick something and go deep into that thing that they're picking. So in the select stage, they'll come up with 2 or 3 maybe pretty good ideas that within a certain pathway, this is what I'm looking at right now.
So one of the things I was thinking of there, Steve, as you were talking about that is we're all of us are involved in different groups and conversations that where we have current employers right now in our part of the state here in Northeast Indiana that are short of quality employees, right? And so many of our employers in the area are looking to the schools and saying, I need you to be able to produce, I'll put in air quotes, more of this type of employee to meet the needs of that business sector. And again, I'm not saying that is a negative thing for where they're at. At the same time, as to what you're talking about, we're trying to help kids and students identify where their interests and passions lie, right? Which may or may not necessarily align with where the current job sector have openings at, especially as you've talked about, if half the jobs aren't even probably created yet for where they're looking to go into. Without going down a huge rabbit trail on that, that's probably a whole nother video. Any thoughts on kind of that dynamic between current job demands and trying to balance that with students' interests and skill sets?
Well, I think that the most obvious thing here is the goal to become a goal setter. Really comes into the select process very, very strongly. And also understanding that my goals today are not necessarily going to be my goals tomorrow, but I do have goals today and I will have goals tomorrow. We'll let the rest of it change and move. It's just going to, we have no control over that. When I was growing up in the 1960s, if I lived in West Virginia, I might probably think an awful lot about the coal industry in some kind or another. Maybe I'm going to work in a coal mine. Maybe I'm going to run a coal mine. Maybe I own a coal mine, but maybe I'm in supply chain with coal. Now that I'm 74 years old, if I was in West Virginia today and I was 16 today, I wouldn't be thinking too much about coal. Coal isn't something that really has much of a future. But I did develop a goal when I was 16. And when the world around me changes, I still have the goal set that I can just find a different occupation at that particular point that satisfies it.
I really like this whole idea of kids setting goals. And along with that goal setting, you know, so many schools are really emphasizing the 21st century skills, the 4 C's. They're building these portraits of a graduate. How do the kids in this program also come to realms with not just what I'm interested in, but what those skill sets that are needed and how do I obtain those skill sets, especially in those soft skills?
I think that they're going to be talking about that in middle school a lot. The soft skill conversation occurs, but it's really going to hit them between the eyes when they get into the high school, especially in junior and senior year when they get out into the workplace, because part of this program is to encourage the school in any way they possibly can to work on some kind of brief internship, job shadow opportunities to get them out in the workforce. And when they get out there, they're going to see for themselves how important those soft skills are. The soft skills are incredibly important, but they're hard to make meaningful until you're actually out in the workplace and can see it for yourself. Okay, here we come on the topic of the day, investing in your future. If you've been a regular reader of the Journal Gazette, you know they've been running a series on the news besides the coronavirus. The only other thing that we've been talking about lately is college debt. And this is something that is extremely important for our students to study. They need to take a real close look as they go through this. They're going to discover some things. Nobody has to tell them. They're going to find out that the job they want is going to require a certification, a credential, or a degree. And they're going to take a look and see how long that takes, how much it's going to cost, and then ask the important question, how am I going to pay for it? While a student may change his mind from his senior year to his freshman year in college about the exact major he's going into, he probably won't change so much between whether he's pursuing a credential, a degree, or certification. Each one of those has a certain cost. And we need students to spend time, real time, especially in their high school years, of trying to figure out how in the world am I going to pay for this? It's a tough topic. Parents a lot of times don't really want to talk about it. They have a hard time talking to their student about how much money they're going to have to contribute. As a parent myself, I know that I always wanted to be able to do whatever I could possibly do to make my child educationally happy. But sometimes that takes a real close look in the mirror and the ability to say to myself, I can't help you very much. I can't afford a big name school. What is it that you really want? What's your goal, and where can you do that, and what can you afford? If our students leave high school with a sense of what they can afford, then we will have been very, very successful. One of the takeaways we have in this is that through our survey work with students, everybody seems to have a sense of what it costs to go to school, but they don't have a clear factual sense of how much money it's going to take. So what that does is it gets them into some very bad situations with loans, borrowing money to go someplace that they really can't afford in the first place. And then they get out of school and they discover that at best their loan payment's going to be at least equal to their car payment. They're probably not going to be able to get an apartment quite as nice as they wanted or as quick as they wanted because of their student debt. And we would love to see kids think about that. And trust me, in my experience with students over the years, those students who are thinking about debt do a very good job in making sure they have very little debt by the time they graduate. It's possible. They may not get everything they want. They may not be going to the school that's their first choice, but they're graduating with their degree, their certification, or their credential, and they're ready to hit the road running and be in a good place for this whole debt. So, and it's not only just money, it's also investing time and looking at how much time it's going to take you. And the old ROI, what is the return on investment here? These are the things that students need to take a look at and take a look at seriously starting in their freshman and building up until their junior year so that they go into their senior year with a pretty good knowledge. I would say a knowledge that they were at least able to carry on a conversation about where they are as far as student debt and the time it's going to take them to get their next level.
Wow. To me, that's a focus that all we ever do is talk about how much it's going to cost a lot of times. We don't even focus on some of these other things. I was doing some work down in Tennessee, and one of the things I thought was really interesting was I ran into so many parents and students that would tell me that college or post K-12, something like that was not there because they couldn't afford it. And one of the things I learned was we need to start talking to these kids. I'll say sixth grade, but I'll even go down to the idea of second and third grade and their parents, because what I found out was a lot of these people weren't even aware that the state of Tennessee had a tuition-based program for the first 2 years of college paid for. And so some of these kids, even in the sixth grade, are already discounting the idea of post K-12 education because they don't think it's attainable. Any thoughts on that, Steve?
Well, I think that the one example that hits home with me is the relationship in education, the relationship between Ivy Tech and, like, say, for instance, Ball State, where I could stay home or get an apartment situation if that's what I wanted to get out of my house after I graduated from high school, go to Ivy Tech for the first 2 years at a much great financial savings to me. And then all of my credits transfer into the last 2 years on a main campus. That's an easy way to get a discounted education. But if you don't study that stuff, if you don't talk about it, if you don't look it up, and I'm not talking about looking up, the thing that we used to do a lot was tell kids, well, there's a lot of scholarships out there. All you have to do is go to the guidance office and pick up this big book, and it's got 10,000 scholarships that nobody ever asked for, and fill out. That to me is not a good use of my time. A better use of my time is to find out alternative ways for me to get this thing paid for. Now, do I want to go to campus at Ball State my freshman year? Sure, I do. Would I rather, if I want to be a teacher, would I rather spend all 4 years at Ball State? Probably so, if that's what I wanted. Can I afford it is another question. And if I can't afford it, I can go to Ball State. I can go here in Fort Wayne. I can have wonderful experiences and graduate, and in the long term have much less debt, which is what this is all about.
Steve, those are great examples. And as someone who did that exact model, went to community college for my first 2 years and transferred to a 4-year university, it was huge coming in. Basically started my junior year, I was still debt free. So it was a great way to be able to afford a 4-year degree by leveraging the community college systems for the degree that I was looking to pursue. So thank you for bringing that up example, a great example right here in Indiana that students can take advantage of.
I think along with that, Josh, I think we have to also think about, for those kids who really want to spend that 4 years on a campus, what are the possibilities? I know just even in the area teaching, the state of Indiana has some payback programs for people who want to be teachers, which might give them that 4-year experience a possibility too.
Okay, so that's 4 of the 5 attributes, and talking about the invest with so much. I mean, I have a lot of passion on that because I've just seen, and personally as a principal, worked with kids who have had that as their goal and achieved it, had no debt when they graduated from college, and actually, ended up in a situation where they made a little money during those 4 years instead of, their income was a little greater than their outflow. It's possible to do. The last of the 5 steps is the go step, which again, as we talked about before, that's that reflection piece. When we look at the go, we're looking at our next step. Okay, like for instance, I'm in 6th grade and I'm looking for a future that involves maybe a 4-year degree. Well, what does that look like? So in the go step for a 6th grader, it's creating a 4-year plan when they get to high school, making middle school relevant. We all know in talking to middle school teachers that one of the problems they always have with middle school kids is it's kind of, have an attitude sometimes, and I don't mean to overgeneralize about middle school kids, but it doesn't count as much because they're not getting credit for it. They're going to go to ninth grade probably no matter what anyway. So, the whole idea of that future look is very hard, and psychologically it's hard for middle school age students to get that. But when we take a look at the go stage, and we have kids who are planning their 4 years in high school when they're in middle school, suddenly that pre-algebra class might become a whole lot more relevant. Once they understand that they're going to have to know this stuff when they get to high school, and not just because I told them as the principal or their teacher told them, because they see the need, and seeing the personal need, the inductive part of all that reasoning is so very important. The other thing about the go part that's really critical is what we call the Dr. Phil stage of how's that working for you. What's the gap here? I want to be a marine biologist, and I'm flunking biology. That's a gap. And I'm not here to tell you you can't be a marine biologist. I'm just here to tell you that you have a gap. How's that working for you? What are you going to have to do? Are you going to have to take that course over again? Look for it yourself. You can see probably you're not going to get into a decent marine biology school with an F in high school biology. So, the gaps are there. And one of the jobs we as adults have is to point to help, not be a dream killer, but to be a gap pointer outer. This is what your gap appears to me. What do you think? How's that working for you? So the go part of this is also critically important. It's the reflective piece that makes everything else make sense.
Steve, I that is so important, and I really like that emphasis on getting kids to think ahead. I spent many years in the middle school teaching, not as a student. But one of the things I found was, I don't know how many kids told me, "Oh, I'm going to start trying next year when I'm in high school when it counts." So thank you for that insight. I've got one person who commented in the chat room, and I think it's really interesting, is this really relates with the step before this, because as students start to see this pathway, they might actually take some dual credit classes or AP classes that bring down the expense later on of some of the tuition in college. So just a thought there. But I do have a question here in the chat room again. How do students plan for stackable credentials?
Well, I think that it's, first of all, from the invest standpoint and the go standpoint, stackable credentials are incredibly important. And as guidance and schools become more and more aware of the possibility of stackable credentials, the students are, they're not, I have to be careful what I say here, I suppose, they're not really the problem. They're willing to, you can talk to them about anything. It's us as educators knowing about things like stackable credentials and seeing the importance of students taking an honors diploma and being able to talk about that and what it takes, the core 40 and what it takes. And in the course of all of that, getting stackable credentials. I know that, to give a little plug for Columbia City High School here, when I was principal at Columbia City, and to this very day, one of the strongest things that that school has to offer is the opportunity for students to get stackable credentials and to do internships while they're in high school. Those are extremely important things for them to do in order to see their total picture here. So I was, really remiss. I think when you read those articles that are in the Journal Gazette right now, colleges are encouraging high schools to allow students to go. My own granddaughter, for instance, is going into her sophomore year at Marian College year-wise, but she's really already finished her sophomore semester and is beginning the second semester of her sophomore year, which is not all that unusual anymore. So it saves money. It gives them the outlook of what college is going to be like so that they know what they're getting into before they get there. It should be an easy transition, an easier transition. So for all those reasons that the stackable credentials and doing college work when you're in high school is in my opinion, and in this program's opinion, a minimum. It's a minimum for every student to do.
And just to piggyback on that, it's not only the college level work, but it's even the career and tech ed side of this as well, where students are able to access different certifications and even associate's degrees while they're still students in high school. In other words, pursuing that credentialing and degree programs, even if it's not a non-traditional academic path. But again, nearly every school district has those options, and it's really helping kids plan and prepare for that, to maximize that and leverage that so that they don't find themselves at 22, 23, 24 years old and realizing, oh, I wish I would have taken advantage of that 8 years ago in high school when it was free or extremely inexpensive for me to take care of that, and now I got to pay for it on my own. That can be a very different price point for them. So thank you.
I think this is another point just to throw in a thought here of that word college. When we use the word college and career training or readiness or whatever, immediately in our mind, when people, especially my age, think of college, they're thinking of four-year schools. And college is much more inclusive than that now. We've tried to come up with a different term than college. And it's very difficult to find something. So whenever I talk about college, I'm talking about all of it. I'm talking about certifications. I'm talking about diplomas. I'm talking about 4-year degrees, 6-year degrees, whatever. College is the beginning of year 13.
Yeah, post-secondary. So what happens next there, Steve?
We are now ready for Mike to talk.
Oh,
Okay. First of all, I had a question here. Can you give us a little bit of a definition before I go into here on this whole idea of C3 or college career conversations? Because a lot of people don't really, they hear the term C3 and they don't know what does that mean.
Okay, well, C3 is another whole time. It is the most interesting part of the whole program. It's the capstone. It's the opportunity for the student to get up in front of a group or in front of a camera or in front of a class or in front of a person and talk about their journey. So you take these 5 steps and you put them into a presentation. Who am I? Connecting that to my career pathway, how I did that. Selecting, this is the career I've selected, this is the work it's going to take me to get there, and this is my next step. So it's taking these 5 steps, the 5 attributes, and putting together into some sort of a presentation that can be as creative or as mundane as anybody wants to make it. It's a good opportunity for some real creativity. It's an opportunity for a student to prepare this and then play it to his parents, to sit around at home and talk about, here is my plan. It's your plan in a nutshell. And we've done lots and lots of work on this college and career conversation. And I will tell you, if it doesn't exist, the program won't work as well as the programs that do have it.
Wow. Well, thank you, because I knew some people wanted to know that. The other thing I look at it is it sounds like, first of all, the basis for another great webinar, and also it looks like something that could almost be part of, I feel like every student graduating should have a senior portfolio. And it sounds like this might actually work as part of that portfolio.
Along with all of our program, this is a very simple way, logical way, and clear way for the student to express their next step. One of the problems that I've had over the years as an administrator with the portfolio is the production of it all. You know, it's a big production. If you're doing an art portfolio, it's a big production. And when you have hundreds and hundreds of seniors, that's pretty tough to do. This C3 is doable whether you're at Adams Central or whether you're at Homestead High School. And it's doable either place just as easily. And it is something that could lead to a big production, but it's something that every student, 100% of the kids should be able to do by the time they graduate from high school by doing it every year. Sixth graders do it, seventh graders do it. Every year they take that, they build on it, build on it, and build on it until finally by their junior, senior year, they have a real good sense of who they are and what their future might hold for them.
I like that idea of doing, and because I'm a project-based learning person and makerspace person, as you can see on the screen here. And I think that as kids do, it gives them a chance to reflect. And I know that one of the things Steve talked about us with right at the beginning there was how reflection is imminent when it comes to learning. And so I want to talk just a little bit about the Ask program as you have learned more about it. And another program we have here at Region 8, which is funded through the Schwab Foundation, which is Makerspace, which we've had a lot of schools throughout Northeastern Indiana a part of. It's part of Schwab, Make It Your Own, and Region 8. And as we go on with this, we start looking at the next slide, and we can start looking at both Ask and Makerspace really are a connection type program that really fuels on kids' passion. They're wanting to investigate, they're planning, they're looking at their pathways, which I look at as student-owned learning, putting students in the center of learning. And to me, when we do that, that's when learning becomes powerful. So I wanted to show just how we here with Makerspace has connected with the Ask program, and you will learn more about Ask in coming webinars. But one of the things, as we go on to this next slide, Josh, one of the things that I saw in the chat window here was the importance for teachers to discuss careers throughout the curriculum. So you have your Ask program, and you also have things that can now go into your curriculum, both through Ask and as a direct program, and also how can we indirectly use some of the things. And they have a website, and we'll be showing you that website, but on that website, there are some actual lessons for each of the grade levels that you might be able to connect with. And with the Makerspace program, what we're trying to do is we're looking at the Ask career planning steps, and we're using the know, the connect, the select, the invest, and the go. And we're asking teachers, as you develop curricular plans, which have a maker's emphasis, what ones of these can you connect with? Can you connect with the know? Can you connect with the connect? Okay. When can kids start selecting? Okay. And so as we look at all these types of things, we have found it very valuable to look at the Ask program and use it as a vehicle to intertwine and bring an integration in to the everyday curriculum, which I've seen so many people in the chat room really trying to emphasize that, and also just not just your curriculum, but all curriculums, because all curriculums are intertwined. We have a cross-curricular thing. So that's some of the things we're looking at in the Makers program of how we can connect with Ask. And I really believe that teachers can connect with Ask through their regular curriculums and also working on the actual Ask program itself, and which I know Josh and Steve are going to give us a little more information for, of how do you do this, how do you get part of this, because it's really something that every kid should be a part of. I mean, they're going to have a career for the rest of their life until they're retired like me, and then it'll be something else. But I look at retirement as a career too. So I had a pathway and a passion for it. So Josh?
No, thanks, Mike. I appreciate that. And really, I think what I loved about your comments there is, I'm sure Steve would agree, probably the most successful schools that have integrated Ask into their work with their students are those that it has a true integration. It's not just simply a standalone piece that stands off to the side. It's something that's incorporated into the school culture. It's incorporated into what happens. And when you have teachers talking about it, parents, students, all kind of where this is part of that culture, you're going to see a much deeper impact as opposed to just kind of a one-off task-oriented type activity, just as it would be for any curriculum that we do in our schools. If we can really help students connect, see that energy, see how they interact with everything that they're doing, both in and out of school, it can have some huge advantages for them. And so again, as you can see on your screen here is a reminder for Ask and for the Makers program. Thanks to the Schwab Foundation and their generous funding of these programs, these are free programs to all schools in Northeast Indiana. We would love to connect with you and have talk more about what this might look like. Again, these could be, it does not have to be an entire 6 through 12 integration all at once. It might be systematic over a period of grades, over a period of years to help make this happen. It could be middle school only and then looking to bring it into high school, or high school only. And we would love to have those conversations of what that might look like. And again, we'll have both face-to-face and virtual options, obviously respecting the situation right now with our current health pandemic that we're dealing with. On the screen, you'll see my email there as a executive director for Region 8, as well as the website for both Ask and Indiana Makerspace. So as we reflect on our time together here, I really want to thank both Steve Debker and Mike Gorman for joining me today in this discussion. Again, the Ask program is a fantastic model to help students take control of their own career readiness path and really be guided through that, and allows them, as Mike said, take ownership of that process. And when they have ownership, that outcome is just going to be ratcheted up a notch. It's not about adults putting it on them and telling them what they should be. It's about students going through this path of discovery through a very intentional process through grades 6 through 12, as they know and learn about themselves, connect with possibilities, select where they need to go, invest to make sure that they can financially make it happen, and then go and do it, enact that plan, make it happen, and launch themselves into their post-secondary career options. Again, I want to thank our presenters who are on the screen here. Also, not on the screen, but a significant contributor to this work is Mrs. Barbara Cisco. You can see her contact information there. If you need more information about Ask, Mr. Steve Debker and Mrs. Cisco would be fantastic contacts. You can contact them directly at those email addresses. If you'd like more information about the Makerspace program or other things that Mike might have mentioned today, please feel free to reach out to him at the email listed there. This information, as well as any additional supporting documentation, will be on the Region 8 website. If you go under professional development, there'll be a link down there to online learning. That'll be posted there, along with several other videos that we're putting together to help educators as we move forward here in this time of, again, the COVID-19 pandemic. And again, would love to connect with you and help you advance in your school district with what you're working on with your students. And finally, again, just a thanks to the Schwab Foundation for making this all possible, for bringing us together, for supporting this work. We are excited to be a part of that here at Region 8. Excited to work with our team for both our Ask program and Makerspace, and we would love to connect with you. Again, you see the websites for both of those programs on your screen. And again, would love to answer any questions that you might have at the email addresses we provided. Thanks again for your time in watching this video. Thanks again to Mr. Steve Debker and Mr. Mike Gorman for joining me today. And we look forward to seeing you next time with our next educational series. Thanks, everyone. Stay safe, and we'll see you soon.